All right, well, thanks everyone, and welcome to the 2022 VuFind Summit. And as is now tradition, I am going to start with the state of the project talk, where I'll talk about what's new since last time, what's coming soon, and how you can get involved in planning and improving for next time. So we'll start with what's new. And I will confess, it's not as much as we've had in some past conferences, in part because last year's summit was later than usual, and this year's summit is earlier than usual, so not quite as much time has gone by. But nonetheless, we've had some releases, a few bug fix releases on 8.0, and then the 8.1 release, adding some new features. Some highlights include, as of 8.03, we updated Solr to address the log4shell vulnerability, which caused everybody some pain last year. So this also serves as a reminder that if you're running an old version of Solr, you really should be sure that you patch your log4j to be safe from this really unpleasant vulnerability that affected a lot of systems. 8.1 also brought a few new and improved features. There's a new configurable custom Solr filters feature that lets you create some more flexible checkbox facets and so forth. There are some improvements to the way that facets are translated. So for example, you can now use a pattern and combine the actual facet values with translated strings associated with those values. This is useful, for example, in translating classification schemes. You can show the actual classification value as well as a description that's internationalized. And a few other things. We added some new languages to the interface. We integrated with some new services and so forth. You can always look at our changelog in the wiki to see all the gory details. Other things that are new are developments in the VuFind community. Most significantly, we've been talking about it for a few years, but it has finally happened. VuFind is now formally part of the Open Library Foundation, which means that VuFind itself is an independent nonprofit organization, and it has support from the OLF. We believe that this will help to ensure that the project is sustainable without relying on any single institution to keep it going. We also made a lot of progress on our video library of tutorials. I believe at this point it's pretty stable. It covers all the major topics that you might want to know to get introduced to VuFind. Certainly, we're open to recording more if people have suggestions, and we'll try to keep things updated as needed. But the video project is now pretty mature. We also spent some time reviewing and updating our documentation, particularly focusing on the pages that see the most traffic. Of course, documentation is never done, so we're going to continue to do this kind of work, but I think we're in pretty good shape. And the project management committee, which was formed last year, is continuing to work on growing the community, planning the project, and raising funds to improve our capacity and sustainability. I also have an exciting announcement in the realm of community, which is that we've started developing a registered service provider program where companies that offer VuFind related services can support the project in a formal way. It gets them some benefits like participation in project management committee meetings with a non-voting seat, some extra promotion, and we hope that this collaboration will be beneficial both to the project and to the people who support the project. And while we haven't yet done our big push to contact everybody who offers VuFind services, that's coming in the next month or two, thanks to some word of mouth at WolfCon last week, we have our first registered service provider already, which is Effective Web Work. So thank you very much to Effective Web Work for supporting the project, and I really look forward to collaborating with you. And I also hope you will be the first of many registered service providers. If we get everybody on board, it will give us a lot of power to do exciting things in the project. So thanks again, and if you need VuFind services, look at Effective Web Work. So with all that out of the way, we've talked about what's happened, so what's coming next? First of all, we have VuFind 9, our next major release, coming either later this year or early next year. The date still has to be scheduled, and it will, to some degree, depend on how much we decide we have to fit into the release and how much can slide into 10. But we already have some really exciting things coming. One of the first, and you'll hear more about this tomorrow, is blended search. For a long time, people have been asking, do I really have to keep all of my search results from multiple sources in separate columns? Can't we blend them all together into a single list? Now you can. It requires some configuration and mapping, of course, but it's a great contribution from the National Library of Finland. I think it's going to excite quite a few people. Maybe not as exciting, but also something a number of people have asked for. We're going to have an optional feature you can turn on to allow people to assign numeric ratings to records. So you can have sort of a ranking to accompany user comments, or you could use it independently of user comments if you like. A lot of work has been done to improve the way that VuFind stores and interacts with MARC records. For many years, we've relied on the file MARC library, which has been a great help to us. But unfortunately, that library is very much tied into the pair ecosystem, which is increasingly unsupported. So we've migrated to new MARC handling code. We've also added some changes so that we now index using MARC in JSON instead of binary MARC in the Solr index, which helps to avoid some length limits and just makes storage more consistent. Though, of course, you still have the option to store your MARC records in other ways if you want to. We're only changing the default behavior. There have been some contributions that improve VuFind's feedback handling and administration. So now, in addition to sending emails when users submit feedback forms, you can store those form responses in a database, and there's an admin panel where you can view those responses and assign them to different states, which can help with local workflows. A nice little thing. We have a new feature called interval CAPTCHA. So this is a feature that will sort of time limit functions in VuFind if you turn it on. So for example, only allow people to send one email per minute, things like that. It helps to prevent abuse, but in a very seamless way. And significant theme improvements. We've been doing ongoing work to refactor our themes, standardize things like icons, and generally move toward a newer and better theme. There are also some ongoing sort of infrastructure upgrades and modernizations that need to happen. I'm not sure that all of these will happen in time for 9.0. I think some will slide into 10. But there are things we've been talking about before. There are some older Laminas components that aren't getting much attention anymore and need to be replaced with more active and supported libraries. There are some Solr features that are going to be changing in the future, so we need to be ready for those. And we just recently discovered that the Blowfish encryption algorithm is falling out of favor, so we need to figure out a new default for encrypting ILS credentials in the database. So that's the next release, but there's even more ahead. Of course, we need to think about VuFind 10, because with VuFind 9 getting fairly close to completion, there are going to be some things that will happen in the next major release. One being a big theme overhaul. I'll be talking more about themes a little later, but this has been an ongoing discussion for quite a few years, and we need to really make some headway on it. VuFind 10, I think, will be the time that we are able to stop supporting PHP 7 and begin fully taking advantage of new features in PHP 8. PHP 7 is reaching end of life this November, and I think in theory we probably could pull PHP 7 support even in release 9, but given that the work on 9 is nearly done and some people may need some extra time to get up to PHP 8, I think waiting until 10 is probably going to make the most sense. And as I mentioned, there are some things that probably won't get quite done in 9, so those will carry over to 10, and I certainly hope that all of the necessary dependency updates will be finished in 10. just in time for inevitably the next round of dependencies that need to be updated, because like documentation, this seems to be a thing that is never truly over. And now another announcement that might come as a bit of a surprise, but here it is. A few years ago, Villanova released our digital library platform, VuDL, as open source, and it never really saw much adoption. But it's been out there. We've been using it. It's a system built using VuFind as the front end and Fedora Commons as the back end. And the platform needed some modernization. And so I've been spending a lot of time this year in collaboration with a few other people at Villanova to build a whole new version of VuDL, which may or may not have a name change. We need to talk about that too. But the important thing is that it is likely to be fully functional by late this year or early next year, a fact which might be of interest to other people who are invested in VuFind. So the new version of VuDL is built with a Node.js and React-based interface on top of Fedora 6. And the user interface is powered by VuFind with the universal viewer for displaying content. And because digital libraries are complicated Rube Goldberg machines, there are lots and lots of other tools in there for pipelines and whatnot. But it's a fully functional platform. As of right now, of course, this has really been built for Villanova's needs, but it is open source. And if people are interested in collaborating on this, do please let me know. I'm more than happy to tell you more about it. And maybe we can build more of a community around this than we were able to do around the first iteration. Other things coming up. Community development is ongoing. We made huge amounts of progress in the past couple of years as we were preparing to join the Open Library Foundation, but there's always more to do here. So a few next steps. We really need to be a little more serious about raising funds. We've developed some membership models and things like the Registered Service Provider Program, which I already talked about, but we really need to market these and make sure people are aware of them. And so, consider this an initial plug. VuFind could always use more support, and if you're interested, there are opportunities you can find on the VuFind website, or stay tuned for our fund drive, which I'm sure will be coming up. Also, we are really looking at reevaluating the monthly community call. As I mentioned, our video project has been really successful and helpful, but has kind of wrapped up. And for quite some time, the community call was really focused around recording new videos. So with that done, we need to think about what's next. And I think we'll be sending out a survey to get your feedback and ideas, not only about what we should use the community call for, but also whether the current time and frequency is convenient for you. So there may be some changes ahead there based on feedback, and we'd love to hear from you. Of course, I keep talking about documentation never being done, so we're going to keep working on that. Another item that might be interesting is looking at integrating some kind of translation platform for VuFind. As you probably know, the software has been translated into a lot of languages, and we have some locally built tools that help to manage this, but it's still a lot of manual work every time we do a release to collect all of the translations. Maybe there's a way we can automate that more. So if this is something you've done with other projects or have recommendations, I'd love to hear about that. It's something we'll be thinking about. So having said what we've done and what we're going to do, let's talk a little bit about road mapping, because this summit has a lot of interesting talks ahead. I'm really excited about all the content, but where it all leads every year is to a road mapping session where we talk about what we're going to do in the coming year and how we might achieve our goals. So I wanted to highlight some things that we all could think about so that when we get to that discussion, we are prepared. So things to think about. The first thing, and the thing that from my perspective is the most important to get a handle on this year, is theme development logistics. I'm really proud of all of the things we've accomplished in the VuFind project, but I'm also somewhat painfully aware of the fact that we've been promising a new theme for several years, and we just never quite seem to get there. We're good at constantly improving the themes that we have. And this is all toward the goal of developing a new theme. But there are a lot of open questions, a lot of ideas, a lot of work. And we really need to figure out a way to get a handle on all of that and start actually getting it done. So my hands are really full with other aspects of the project. I don't personally feel I have the capacity to take complete control of theme development at this time. So I'm hoping that others will have some time and some ideas, and we can come up with a plan at our meeting tomorrow to move forward and really get this thing done. I know Chris has done a lot of work on this and has a lot of ideas, but he's very busy too. We've put together some tools, like we opened up GitHub discussions as a place where we could start to gather thoughts. That hasn't gotten a lot of use yet. So I think we just need a plan. Maybe this can also be tied to the community call in some way, just to gather input, make decisions, schedule things out, work in a more agile way, perhaps, and see where that gets us. So please come ready to think about that and discuss it. But of course, that's not the only thing we can talk about. There are also the usual things that I suggest every year. Community development, what could we do better to collaborate and support the project? What features are currently missing that your institution might need? What code have you developed locally that might be useful to others that you could share? What needs do you have in terms of tutorials, documentation, or training? As I keep saying, the video project feels fairly finished to me, but maybe it's not. There's always room to add more. And of course, preceding our road mapping session, there's a series of lightning talks, which I hope will help to add even more ideas to the conversation, in addition to those that surface during these 2 days of talks. So if you have something you'd like to share with us in 5 minutes, please sign up for a lightning talk. The sign up sheet is in the conference planning document, which is linked from the summit page in our wiki. If you just go to vufind.org, there's a banner at the top of the page linking to the summit, and then there's a link to the conference planning document from there. I see a couple people have already signed up, and I thank you for that, but we still have a couple slots open, so feel free to join in. And if we fill up, we can always stretch our schedule a little bit to accommodate more, so don't be shy about it. And of course, the final thing to think about is how you can help. As I mentioned, I have a lot going on. I think we all do. And help is always welcomed in terms of outreach about the project, committing time to code or documentation or review or discussion. Every little bit helps, and this really is a team effort. So I'm always happy to welcome more to the team. So again, don't be shy if you would like to get involved and you aren't already. And of course, thank you to all who already are. I definitely would not be able to do this without the project management committee and the committers and everyone who participates, even by complaining about bugs. Everything helps. So that is everything I had to share. So we have about 10 minutes left. So if people have questions about really anything, I'm happy to discuss them. And if not, we could move forward.
Thank you, Damien. I'm not seeing any questions to report in any of the chats that I'm monitoring. So if you do have a question, you are first in line.
Yes, I'll definitely give a couple minutes because I don't want to get too far ahead of schedule and confuse anyone, in case there are people who really didn't want to hear me talk and want to show up at 9:30 for the next talk. I wouldn't be offended.
While all the questions are flocking in, I'd like to mention that even though version 9 is full of exciting new features, I'm still trying to sneak a couple of new ones in. So we'll see how it goes, but stay tuned. There will be more.
Oh boy. And I guess we can at least talk about cookie consent is another feature that is currently in progress for people who need that for GDPR or other privacy-related reasons. We're hoping to have a standard solution for that built in.
That's true, because it's well, it's something that can be done locally with different kinds of modules, but since it's not an easy or a simple task, it helps to have some structure or some built-in functionality for that.
Right. And I see we do have a question coming in, which is, do we have any plan to develop a GUI for VuFind administration? And the answer for that is, I think that could be beneficial. It's not something that's currently on the roadmap just because we still have a lot of maintenance work to do, and adding a graphical administration tool just multiplies the amount of work that needs to be done to support the project. But I have certainly thought about it, and I wonder if, for example, it might be feasible to develop some kind of administration tool that reads our configuration files and uses the comments in those files to structure its interface. You know, maybe we could develop some standard annotations that could be parsed, and that would allow us to create a general administration interface that wouldn't require a lot of separate maintenance, as long as we always structured our configurations in a reliable way. Of course, the other issue with a graphical interface is it opens up potential security holes, so you need to be very cautious about that as well. I'm not sure if we have a Jira ticket for this, but maybe we should, because it is something that people ask about from time to time. So feel free to look at our Jira and search for administration tool or GUI or whatever. And if you don't find anything, you can open up a ticket, and at least we'll have a place to discuss and track the topic.
If I may add something to that, for the next presentation for the Ixteo publication service, we also had to add some sort of administration functionality to our local installation. So I can show that in the next presentation. It's still pretty small, but I also think it could be pretty useful to have something like that.
That's great. And of course, I should mention that we do have the VuFind admin module, which contains some administrative features, things like the ability to clear the cache and look at the status of Solar and so forth. So there is a place that could be expanded to add new things. It would just be a matter of deciding what things are most valuable and coming up with a strategy to do it. And it could also be done incrementally as well.
I just want to briefly add that one of the first places we may see this, if we do develop a GUI, is for the theming. It's something I've been strongly considering, to easily change the color, icon sets, things like that. Is having a PHP page to change some basic CSS values seems like a straightforward enough thing that it could make theming much easier. So that's been something I've been considering for the new theme for a while. So seems it's just below the surface, where the surface is the roadmap. So maybe it's something we can get on there this year.
That's great. We still have about 5 minutes left, so if there are any other questions, please feel free to throw them in. Another question is, will Solar always be used? Are you planning to use Elasticsearch? And the answer to that is, we do have a ticket for this. I think that adding Elasticsearch would be a possibility in VuFind, because VuFind is designed to be agnostic about how its searches are performed. It's just a question of having the time and effort to build that all out. We looked at it a few years ago and just ran into the obstacle that there isn't currently a convenient tool for indexing MARC records into Elasticsearch. So we would have to revise the SolarMark indexer to write to Elasticsearch, and then we would have to rewrite all of VuFind's code to read from Elasticsearch. I think functionally speaking, Solar and Elasticsearch are very similar. It wouldn't be technically challenging, but because we have been built on Solar for so many years and we have such robust Solar-based functionality, replicating all of that on another platform is inevitably a lot of work. Personally, I don't think that there's a huge difference between Elasticsearch and Solar in that both are built on the same underlying technology. They just have some different scalability and interface characteristics. I'm certainly not an expert on this. I know people have preferences one way or the other, but right now we're built on Solar because we were built before Elasticsearch even existed, and so switching to Elasticsearch would just be some work. But it's certainly not impossible. If people have a compelling reason to do it, I'm more than happy to collaborate with you and help you through the process, because it's always good to offer options, and I would be happy to incorporate Elasticsearch support. I just don't personally have the capacity to build it without a strong reason to do so. I see it.
If I may add
Please.
just a couple of notes. There are some non-technical issues with Elasticsearch, one being the licensing, which may be problematic in some ways. So that's something to consider between these products. And from my experience, while the products are similar in many ways, both are based on Lucene and offer similar capabilities. The APIs are different enough that they cannot be considered siblings, in a way that adding Elasticsearch is not just converting some Solar queries to Elasticsearch, but should be considered a new backend. Another thing is that Elasticsearch has some default limits that make it perform really well for most cases, but should be taken into account for certain use cases, such as one example of those is that by default the number of search results is quite limited, and you can only get, if my memory serves, 10,000 records. So you can page up to 10,000 records, and if you want to change that, it's possible, but it's another configuration option. So there are certain things that need to be considered before just replacing Solar with Elasticsearch.
Thank you. And yes, definitely, I would not really consider replacing Solar with Elasticsearch, but adding parallel support for people who, for whatever reason, can't run Solar would be a welcome addition, I think, if feasible. I also see from the Q&A that the Folio community is talking about Elasticsearch licensing right now, so that will be interesting to see how that turns out. Also, one more quick question, and then I think we'll be about out of time, which is, are there plans to switch to Bootstrap 5? And certainly that's something that needs to be discussed as part of the new theme conversation. Obviously, we need to get off of Bootstrap 3 as it has hit end of life. But at the time that Bootstrap 4 came out, switching to it seemed extremely disruptive without being particularly beneficial. So a lot of the effort we've been doing recently has been to make the theme design more framework agnostic, so that we aren't tied to particular frameworks in the long term. So maybe Bootstrap 5 is something we can plug in, or maybe something else is better. That's something that we need to decide. And I don't know if Chris wants to say more about that.
No, that basically covers it, and I'll be typing out an answer to this as well in the Q&A. But yeah, the hope is to make the theme, maybe the actual template to the theme, framework agnostic, to prevent that situation from happening again, where we couldn't go to Bootstrap 4 without major disruption, and then using the features of Sass or other CSS preprocessors on the back end to bring that style and that accessibility back to the theme by processing it on the back end. So it's something that we are hoping to do, hoping to have our cake and eat it too.
All right, well, thank you for all the good questions. I will now step aside and turn over to Mario Trojan, who is going to talk to us about the Ixtheo publication service, Green Road Open Access.